Hi guys, in this video we're going to have a look at what variables are and try to understand a little bit more about how they work in Java. So you obviously would be familiar with the concept of a variable from mathematics, um, where we might say in an equation something like, I don't know, x squared equals 16 or something like that, and then we try to work out the value of x. But it's not quite the same in mathematics, because in mathematics we have the idea that x has a fixed value. So you're trying to determine what x is, and then there is a particular answer. Now, when we're talking about variable in programming, in most, not all, but most programming languages, that variable has a particular value at a particular time, but the value of the variable can change over time. So let's have a look at how that actually works. Now, we'll start off with a really simple example of a Java statement. I've got int x equals 10. So I'm saying here that there is a variable. The name of the variable is x. The type of the variable is integer. Now, in most cases, the type of the variable is going to start with a capital letter because it is a class. So normally in Java, types are classes, but there are some types which are not classes, and those start with a lowercase letter. So int is one of those special types which isn't a class. Don't worry too much if you don't understand that part at the moment, because it will become clear a little bit later on in the course. But for the time being, we're storing a variable called x, and it is an integer. Now, this part on the left before the equals sign is called the declaration. And when we write the declaration, all we're saying is that the variable exists and I need a place to store the data for that variable. I'm not actually saying what the value of the variable is. So when Java sees int x, it's going to make an arrangement so that in the computer's memory, okay, which I've represented over here by a grid of cells, Java's going to take one of those cells and it's going to say, okay, that's where I'm storing the value of x. So it is actually possible in some situations to write int x without any equals value. And in that kind of situation, Java will put aside a spot which is going to call x, and it won't necessarily have any value in there. But in most situations, we're going to actually assign x a value at the same time that we set aside memory for it. So in this case, we've set int x, which is the declaration, and then that's followed by what's called the initialization. So we initialize the variable to the value of 10, and that puts 10 into that space in the memory. So when I talk about x, I'm referring to that memory location, which is actually location 22, although I don't necessarily care about that, and it contains the value of 10. Okay, so now once we've set the value of x to 10, we're probably going to use it in more calculations. So let's have a look at how I could change the value. Now, changing the value is what's called assignment. Okay, we are changing what's stored in that memory location. And an assignment contains two parts. So there's the L value, which is the left-hand side value, okay, on the left-hand side of the equals, and there's the R value on the right-hand side of the equals sign. Now, in the R value, anytime I mention X, I'm talking about the old value inside that location in memory. Okay, so remember, X points to that number 10. Well, X points to that location in memory, and that location in memory, when I start doing this command, contains the value 10. So everywhere on the right of the equals sign where I mention X, I'm talking about the value 10. So here I've got 10 plus 1, that equals 11, and then that's going to be the new value of x. So I'm storing the new value, 11, into the same location that I previously had the value 10. So the 10 gets wiped over, and an 11 gets stored in its place. So notice that X still refers to exactly the same location in memory, but what has been stored in that location has changed now. Okay, let's have a look at what happens when we are dealing with arrays. So in the case of arrays, instead of putting int x, I put int followed by these square brackets and then x. Now the square brackets are saying that what I want is not just one integer, but I want to store multiple integers. The number of integers that I want to store isn't written on the left hand side of the equals sign, but we do see it on the right hand side of the equals sign. So in this example, I'm saying that I want to store 10 integers. So the left hand side of the equals sign is still the declaration, just like in the first example we looked at. And just like in the first example that we looked at, when I make a declaration, what Java's done is it's put aside one area of the computer's memory, and that area is called X. Now, what I want to store in X is not just one integer, but actually I want to store 10 integers. So this raises a bit of a problem because the value of X is just one box. And one box is big enough to store only one number. If I want to store 10 integers, I need to use a bit of a trick. So the trick that I use is to allocate more memory. Okay, allocating memory is where I set aside some extra memory to store additional data. And you can tell when Java is allocating memory because it's going to have this word new inside the command. So when I say new int 10, what I'm doing is setting aside 10 blocks. They're all together in a row like this, and this is going to be the space where I store the 10 numbers that I want in my array. So I can put my 10 numbers in here, but the question is, how is this box connected to X, which is what I declared earlier on? Well, the way that we tie these together is that we store inside the value of X the location in memory where I have this large array. So those 10 values start at memory location 50. That is the first box there. So inside X I store memory location 50, and then when I'm trying to do stuff with the array, I look in X, and what I find is not a value of X, but instead I find the location in memory where I've stored all 10 values of X. Okay, so now just like with normal variables, we can change the data inside an array. So let's have a look at that. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm changing the fourth item in my array of 10 values. Now, just like before, this is the L value, the value on the left-hand side of the equals sign, and that refers to, first of all, X, which is this spot in memory. Now remember, that spot in memory doesn't store the value of X, it just stores the memory address of the array, and that array will store the 10 values which I'm referring to. Now in this case, I want to change value number 4, and in programming we count from 0, so value number 4, that's 0, that's 1, that's 2, 3, and then this is value number 4. Now you can see how this makes sense in programming, because if I've started from location 0, then I'm now in location 54 here. 54 is that square. And I can calculate this really easily because remember that X contains 50, the starting location of the array. This is called the starting address. If I add 4 onto that, then I get the location where I need to store my R value. So the 27 here is now going to get stored into that location in my array. Okay, so this covers all of the essentials of what you need to know about Java variables at this point in the course. Okay, when we give a variable a name, we are referring to one location in memory where we can store a value. If we use a variable to store an array, then what we're actually doing is the location of the variable in memory stores another memory address, and that memory address refers to where the data for the array is stored. Now we need to do it that way because there's no way that we could fit all of those values into a single box. Okay guys, I hope all this makes sense. If you do need any extra help, then just leave me a message or speak to me in the meeting.